Bravo, request permission to engage enemy paratroopers and attempt to snatch a grid Papa uniform 259er, 119er, break. Enemy is unaware of our presence at this time, over. Solid copy. Hitman 2-3, Echo.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Commander's Voice. This is Ben Powers here today with my good friend Nick Jacobellis. We're talking more about the Blade Runner teams and his book's Controlled Delivery. We're talking about the customs operations down in Miami in the late 80s, early 90s. And so first off, Nick, welcome back. Always happy to have you on the show.
Hi, Ben. Glad to be back.
So one thing I wanted to kind of jump right in on is everybody who's watching the show knows you guys have just come off a series of maritime events, highly successful operations. You're ready to get back in the air because you guys are an air operations unit. But one of the things that I would kind of made me wonder after the last episode, you guys are highly successful. You haven't lost an aircraft. You haven't lost a man. The maritime operations were kind of hairy, but were you guys getting to a point where things kind of seemed like, maybe your luck was running out, or maybe things are going, too perfectly? Like, how did you guys kind of cope with the stress of repeated operations, especially as time and time again, you would kind of come through unscathed?
Before we started the joint maritime air operation that we discussed, which was the first case we worked for our Albuquerque office, the only aircraft that we could get to do the seaplane in was a short wing version. We always used a long wing version. So I spoke to Captain Video and I said, well, what's the absolute worst thing that can happen if we use the short wing version? He goes, we'll crash. And I said, okay, well, we have no choice unless we want to walk away from this deal that we've been trying to do for a year. Like I said, 6 times we started up, country clearance denied. We went by boat, didn't need country clearance, got an operational plan approved, picked up 750 keys of coke, 2 bad guys, and schlepped it cross country to New Mexico. So the deal goes down great, controlled deliveries executed. We go to the airport, and it was the first time that we ever spent that amount of time, agents included, not just with our flight crew and with our crew chief, working on the aircraft. And I remember we're up on ladders and we had 2 150-gallon drop tanks. They look like napalm bombs under the wings, and they're filled with aviation fuel, 150 gallons each. So we grab breakfast and we take off. It was kind of late in the day too. It was almost close to noontime, and it's we're flying out of Santa Fe. It's like 60, I think it's over 6,000 foot elevation. Get into the co-pilot seat, and because our co-pilot stayed behind, so Captain Video asked me to fly the right seat. I said, sure, I have 15 hours in the Cessna 150. I can do this. But I had mentioned in the past, I had flown to Gitmo. The guys would always pull jokes on me. And like the co-pilot would say, hey, Nick, could you sit in the right seat? And I'd say, sure. And then Captain Video would be in the left seat, and they'd go in the back and they'd grab sodas and stuff. And then Captain Video would get up and say, Nick, yeah, you can handle this by yourself. And then and I'm flying across the Bahamas at like 6,000, 7,000 feet or whatever, no instrument training. But the way I was taught how to fly, I always used to look at the instruments. Well, obviously we never crashed, and I'd hear them laughing. So I flew this aircraft enough where I was always comfortable flying it. FAA would disagree, but that's just the way it goes. So I'm in the right seat and I go to buckle in and the seatbelts are broken. There's this old Vietnam era. It's like twine and metal. It's got a loop that you throw, kind of like helicopter seats were like that too. They had that hook, and I had no seatbelts, but I figured, what the heck, I'm just going to sit here and help them anyway. We line up on the center line. I knew when we lined up on the center line that we were going to crash. I didn't say a word. I can't explain it. I sat back. It was something that had to happen. I can't explain it other than to say, I knew that.
So at this point, there's no visual indicators, no instrument indicators. You just have a feeling. I
have this intuition, we're crashing. But I'm not scared. I'm not panicked. It was like it came in one ear and out the other, like a premonition. We take off. We get to like 9,700 feet. We're looking for traffic in the area, and all of a sudden Captain Video is futzing with the starboard engine, and he can't, it's going to be a runaway propeller. You got to be careful it doesn't fly off and come into the cockpit, so he has to shut it down. So now I'm looking out the co-pilot side window going, this stuff only happens in World War II movies, you know, feather number 2. And this aircraft, the reason why Captain Video was concerned about this particular aircraft with the short wing version is because it had absolutely no ability to maintain straight and level flight in an engine out scenario. It only did one thing, go down. Now you can control your descent, but it was going down one way or the other. There's no way. Now the long wing version, it was like a C-47. You could fly that on one engine and make it back. So at one point, Captain Video asked me to take the controls. So I take the controls, and I could feel her starting to shudder, and I recover from the stall, which kind of impressed me because like this was real, and I had trained, you know, when I had my original flight training, at power on stalls, power off stalls. One of them is a little scarier than the other. So I recover, and when she went to shudder again, Captain Video took it, then it started to shudder on him. So we're kind of trying to control our descent. At that point, all I'm thinking about is my wife and 2 sons. I have absolutely not a care, and I just didn't care about anything else. I was so obsessed worrying about who was going to take care of them because I was convinced that we weren't going to make it. And I had a voice in my head, it was telepathic, that said, don't worry, your family will be well cared for. When I tell people this story, and they say, you were in a plane crash? I said, yeah, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. They freaked. They go, what? How could that be? And I said to them, well, because like God kind of spoke to me. I heard the good Lord. He said, don't worry about it. Your family will be well cared for. And he's got a sense of humor because telepathically I said back, but you didn't say I was going to make it. And the next thing that happened was, it was almost as if I had this massive vacuum cleaner attached to my shoulders. And every problem, every worry, every concern I ever had was physically just sucked out of my body. It was a physical release of every negative thing that I've ever felt. I sat back in that seat. I was ready to go. Captain Video said to me, when we cross the highway and get over before we hit the numbers, we're going to drop the 2 tanks. The button's on my side of the plane, little black button. So as we're screaming over I-25, there's a racetrack there. The horses are stampeding. I look out the right co-pilot's window and I see that look on people's faces when they see this monster of a seaplane screaming over the tops of their vehicles. And we just crossed the fence line and Captain Video says, now. I lean over, I press the button. At that point, I think I became the only federal agent to bomb the continental United States. Thank God, both the drop tanks fall off the wings. If one of them hung up, it would have been game over.
Roger.
I'm still feeling really good. And all of a sudden, Captain Video says, we can't go in gear up because we have a boat hull. And if you go in gear hull with a boat hull at 100, maybe 105, 110 knots, we're going to flip sideways, cartwheel. It's going to be ugly. We got to put the gear down. Problem is, it's tricycle gear. And it takes like a minute to extend and lock in position. All of a sudden, as he starts putting the gear down, because of our airspeed, the yaw effect starts. So now we're swaying back and forth like a ride at Disneyland. And it's going all the way to the left and all the way to the right. And now all of a sudden, I don't, like, where's God? He was here a minute ago. And now we're back in the real world. And the gear on my side doesn't extend. And we collapse on the runway at like, I don't know, 100 knots or whatever. And we basically just, instead of cartwheeling, we go off into the desert. And the desert is not like the beach, you know, in New Mexico. It's shrubbery and arroyos and all that kind of stuff. And eventually we come to a stop. And when we come to a stop, I have no seatbelts on. So now I'm being thrown around the cockpit. Captain Video puts his hand out, the yoke hits me in the chest. So after the yoke hit me in the chest and I go flying forward, Captain Video leans over and stops me from going into the windshield. And we're bouncing around. My body gets torqued to the right. My face gets planted on the side of the windshield. I see all the desert smoke and dust. I have no idea if this plane just caught on fire or not. Captain Video says something about we got to evacuate this thing. There were exits on top that I could have went through one on my side, but for some reason we decided to go through the cargo bay, which all of our gear, equipment, weapons, and coolers full of food were all over the place. So because we function like a military outfit, because I'm in the co-pilot seat, I'm the second to the last to get out. So as the 3 passengers in the back, 2 special agents and our crew chief were getting out, I'm kneeling in the cargo bay. And I'm imagining, like in the movies, when you see the ball of fire come through the aircraft. Sure. And nobody's panicking. Everybody does it the right way. You just suck it up. And when you suck things up, you pay for it later. That's just the way life goes. So when it came my turn to go, I jumped out. The plane was up on its side in the desert. And then Captain Video jumped out. And Captain Video, I said, get out. He took off. I said, get out of here, because he had a real flying job. And here comes this FAA official. And I want to see the pilot of this aircraft. So I mean, again, I look like a pirate, beard, ponytail, the whole bit. And I take my creds out, my badge, and I show it to him. I said, well, I was sitting in the right seat, sir. So he assumed that I was the co-pilot. But if I would have showed him an expired student pilot's license, this guy would have had a heart attack. And he just, well, I want to see you guys in the FSDO office tomorrow morning in Albuquerque. Not a problem. Goodbye. So we took a commercial flight home the next day and went home. Captain Video kept saying, this isn't a crash, this is an incident. And I said, no, this is what you call a plane crash. But the Air National Guard guys actually showed up and helped us out. And they towed that aircraft out of the way. There were newspaper people showing up, and we got to remain covert. And then 2 state troopers show up. And Captain Video is really getting worried now. And there's 2 state troopers show up and go, hey, do you mind if we take the aluminum from those 2 bombs you dropped? You know, and I said, take it surplus, knock yourself out, go junk it, buy beer for the FOP bar. I don't care. And we took a flight home, and we pick up right where we left off and do another deal with the Albuquerque office. And the bad guy's name was Jose. He was the middleman, and we had front money. And again, we're ready to go, country clearance. We're all sitting at the trailer at Homestead Air Force Base where our office was co-located. Country clearance denied. Literally 2-3 minutes later, there's a phone call, and it's the ASAC in Miami going, Nick, if you guys, there's a window just opened up. If you guys can get into that strip by first light and get out with that load, you're good to go. So we're flying this, again, Vietnam era seaplane that should be hanging in the Smithsonian. And I'm guaranteeing that we're going to be able to fly this mission with pinpoint accuracy, land in the water and get out of there at like sunrise, not before, first light, and get out of there before sunrise. So we take on the mission, we go. Customs Air flies us down because we pre-positioned the aircraft down in Gitmo and left it there. We get to Gitmo, we put the crew in the BOQ to get some crew rest, and it's too late to go to the O Club to get some chow and food for the guys. So Johnny Walker is working on the plane. I get in this World War II gray Navy Jeep, drive back out to the runway, to the tie-down area, and he says, Nick, we got a problem, we can't take off. We need a nitro card. It's 11 o'clock at night, I'm in Gitmo, I gotta find the nitro card. Thank God I run into one sailor. And I go, look, this is who I am. They didn't know who we were, but they were the Navy again. Great. I said, this is a really strange request, but we can't take off without a nitro card. He says, I'll get you one. He calls a guy out, a technician. They pull out a nitro card, and we had to pump up one of the struts in the landing gear. It was a different plane. It's the long wing version. We're back using the real McCoy now. Go back and get the crew. We do a briefing. They take off. And we got a Jacksonville Air Customs unit flying as a sensor bird, taking these guys down and telling them when to descend so we can get in underneath the radar. And they're at the pickup point. They're picking up the load. Now I'm sitting in a trailer at Gitmo, not far from where the O Club is. And the phone rings, and it's Customs Air Operations. And they go, Nick, 2 Colombian fighters just launched on your plane. And we just ordered the customs aircraft to depart the area. You guys are alone. Well, what the Jacksonville Air guys did was great. Instead of following their orders 110% and doing a 180 and going back to Gitmo, they made these wide sweeping circles so that their sensor equipment could still keep an eye on our aircraft and also on the two fighters, so that they could kind of keep our crew posted on where these two fighters were coming from and how fast they needed to get the heck out of Dodge.
Roger.
And fortunately, while they're making these wide sweeping circles as they're heading kind of like back to Gitmo, half following their orders, thank God, our crew is on the deck and they're getting these transmissions going like, you better go, they're on their way. And our guys get loaded and take off with 500 keys of coke in the nick of time, just like in the movies. And the Colombian fighters go back to Barranquilla, land, and that's it. So they came out unscathed. Could have been a shoot down. You never know.
So things are getting more stressful overall between the crash in New Mexico and now this is the first time you've talked about, this level of stress. I mean, obviously you guys are under stress all the time, but now you're actually having, host nation aircraft, for lack of a better term, actually scrambling against your operation. It just sounds like it's getting a lot more stressors are being added into these missions that you previously hadn't experienced. So that are people getting more on edge?
We smoked a lot. I mean, I was chain smoking at this point to the point where it was, I couldn't smoke any more cigarettes in a day. And we still felt in control of the situation, but this was really hardball. I mean, we always played hardball.
Right.
But, as you know from your own military experience, the more you're exposed to danger and risk, you sit there and you have to say to yourself, like, when are we going to be unlucky? I mean, so far we're blessed. I mean, I'm praying for these guys when they take off. I'm hearing the good Lord, telling me, don't worry, your family's going to be well taken care of. And you're surviving this stuff. But that doesn't mean the bad guys don't get to get a shot back at you. So yes, there is an element of wondering, like, how long we can keep this train on the tracks.
Roger.
This is 1990. We started in October of '88. So we roll into some other deals now. And the Boston office is working with the FBI. And it was a 600 kilo deal. Took a few months to work out the bugs. And we decided to use a C-47. It's going to be a pickup on the Guajira Peninsula, on the ground, not in the water, obviously. It's just not a seaplane. And we had been visited by 2 CIA officers at our trailer at Homestead Air Force Base. Always talked about stuff internationally, never talked about domestic stuff at all. They kept within their jurisdiction, we kept within ours. And they knew that we were obviously in conversation with people down south. So they had every reason in the world to be interested in what we were picking up intel-wise. Well, I get a message one day to call a CIA officer who I never met before, but I call the station and I'm not going to say where he was stationed or what we talked about, but bottom line was, he goes, Nick, I know a really good pilot. I heard about what you guys are doing and he's in Miami right now. So I went and met him. And I call him, the guy could fly anything, DC-8s, you name it, helicopters. I mean, the guy was phenomenal. And it's like we talked about, when you meet somebody, you either really like them a lot or there's a question mark and you're not sure how this relationship's going to go.
Yeah,
this guy was thumbs up all the way. Call him Captain Dakota, because he had a little bit of a British accent and he flew everything, including Dakotas. So we put him in the major in the deal. Agents didn't like to turn their sources over to other agents. You're very protective of your assets. But we had worked so well with the Boston office, and the FBI agents in Boston were nice guys too. I had no problem. I couldn't be in 2 places at once. I'm doing another deal, a DC-6 deal in Newark, New Jersey, involving over 2,000 keys of coke and 7,000 pounds of marijuana. And like I said, we're very busy, and I just trusted the agents where we sent our crew to Gitmo. The Boston agents were there, the FBI guys, I think maybe DEA as well. And everybody interfaced, no problem. They take off, they go to pick up the load, engine problem. Instead of just turning around and going back to Gitmo and risk ditching, they flew to Aruba. But before they left, They flew over that strip and let the guys on the ground hear that engine sputtering. So they knew if they would have landed with a bad engine, the plane would have been abandoned. Now we would have had two guys behind enemy lines, so to speak, stranded in Colombia.
Tracking.
So they go to Aruba. I'm literally just finished a briefing in Newark, New Jersey at the Customs SAC office. I'm walking out the door to go meet bad guys on this deal. And I get a call from Boston. Nick, your two pilots are in custody in Aruba. I'm going, what are they doing in Aruba? They're supposed to pick up the load in Colombia. Well, they had engine problems and they went to Aruba because it was closer. So we flew Johnny Walker, one of our ace crew chiefs down, a Vietnam era helicopter crew chief, and could fix anything. And he got the aircraft fixed. They flew into the strip, picked up 600 keys of coke, flew to Gitmo, gave the load to the agents. They put it on a C-130 and took it to Boston, and the boys flew the plane, the C-47 back. And a good time was had by all. The FBI and the customs agents in Boston made their controlled delivery a success. They locked up a bunch of bad guys. They picked up some money. And we moved on to the fourth deal we did with the Boston office. Meanwhile, I'm on the cover in Newark, New Jersey, and very tense negotiations. There was a female Colombian involved who was a real bitch, very difficult person to deal with. And you could always count on the Colombians to renege on the deal. They owed us $1 million, not a penny less.
Okay.
When we flew into McGuire Air Force Base after picking up, we had to make 2 pickups in Colombia for this. The first pickup, we get there, and a Colombian, and I have to tell this story kind of disjointed because these things are happening at the same time. The Boston deal, this deal, we got another one set up to go. So when they flew in the first time, they're supposed to pick up 2,000 keys of coke and 14,000 pounds of marijuana. That's why we use a DC-6. And when we took off, like I'm watching this propeller go 11 times. It's like 12 o'clock high. I'm like a kid. This is like great stuff. I'm living my dream in life. They land in Colombia, and Alex Agente, this Colombian who had part of the load that was going to go to New York and New Jersey, he walks over to the plane. And because it was an old Air Force DC-6, when they removed the stencils, U.S. Air Force, you could still see U.S. Air Force underneath the tape when they pulled it off. I mean, there was surplus aircraft out there that this happened to, but in light of what happened next, it was even worse. This Colombian looked at the plane and said, I lost a load to a plane like this. These guys are with the DEA.
Oh my gosh.
And now our crew is on the runway, and Gordo, my Cuban informant, was there, and he got these guys to calm down. He was like running for office on the Guerrero Peninsula, shaking hands, giving out sodas and whatnot. And the Colombian that we met undercover in Florida with the gringo, with his American partner, an older guy, anti-government guy, hated law enforcement, liked us enough to give us the deal. The Colombian had flown down there, so he's on the strip, and he goes, these are my people. So he vouches for us, which was bad for him.
I was going to say, I mean.
Well, hey, we convinced them that we were bad guys. They were very, by now after the plane crash, I took 2 more boat trips to Colombia. Now I'm really hurting. I'm using a cane going on the cover, and I'm limping, and the bad guys go, Mr. Nick, sit down. How do you feel? Because I guess they figured like, well, who's going to hire someone who's this messed up to be in a law enforcement position?
That's
so
fair.
I took my injury and turned it around and used it as something that would bolster my cover as a smuggler who crashed the plane. I just left the part out that it was an undercover aircraft, and I got messed up delivering a load, and they bought it hook, line, and sinker. So lucky me, it worked. So we had to make 2 pickups, and we had to go back in a second time, and they picked up the other half of the load. So they come out a little over 2,000 keys. Land in, we fly up to McGuire Air Force Base. Air Force OSI agents there, a bunch of agents from Newark, New Jersey. They had a big truck. They unloaded the aircraft for us. And we had to make a phone call at a certain time. And Pat Roach was my partner. He was the guy, as I mentioned, who got me in to see the SAC to start this off.
Right.
He had a difference of opinion over tactics with the group supervisor from another office. And we said, look, we got to go. So we ended up, there was an agent from Philly there. and we got rented cars and we hauled ass. Find a 30-year-old Warburg. If we have to be there at a certain time, we're landing at 0730. We're taking off at 0800. So we make the second pickup. Long story short, Colombians reneging on the money, and we finally just stick to our guns, and they agree to pay us. Well, we pick up $900,000. Me and the best undercover agent in the Customs Service I ever worked with, Eddie C. Great agent, great partner. And we pick up $900,000, we're counting it, and I call the bad guys up. I said, excuse me, you owe us $1 million. There's only 900,000 here. Oh, Nick, come on, please. It's rush hour, by the way. Oh, come on, you're killing us. I got this woman screaming at me, and I hear her. She's flipping out. I said, listen, this is the United States of America, not fucking Bogota. This is the way we do business here. You owe me $1 million. We picked up your load. We had to pick it up twice because you people screwed up. I want you to get in your car, take this woman back to Queens, where she's probably from, because that was a big center for Colombians in New York metropolitan area. Get my $100,000 and come back here and pay me, and then we'll make the delivery. And they did it. They went and they drove in rush hour traffic. we ordered a bunch of Portuguese food for dinner. Everybody was happy. And when they showed up like at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, they gave us the $100,000. I'm on Route 1 and 9 in Newark, New Jersey by a diner. And all these units are around me. So I turned to Eddie. We're walking into this parking lot, and I see the Colombians are there too. And I said, this could get really ugly. We don't know how this is going to work out. So I said, let's walk over to their car. So Eddie and I walk over to the car where these Colombians, like 3 guys are sitting in a car. I don't know if they have weapons or whatever. And they looked up at me and said, you're that crazy pilot. You really pissed her off. They liked the fact that I gave this woman a hard time. I said, well, you guys want anything? Can we go get you like coffee or soda or something? Because we're right here by the diner. No, we're okay. I said, all right. So we went to meet the main Colombian bad guy. And as soon as we did, the backup teams moved in, New Jersey State Police, Customs agents, and we started taking people down. And everybody got locked up. And one of the sources of information who worked with Gordo. I'm in the Sheraton Hotel in Newark, New Jersey. And I go, I got to give you a really good undercover name. So I call him Pepe Lorenzo. And I don't know why. The name just came out. It stuck with him. To this day, he calls himself Pepe Lorenzo. Then we move on to the 4th Boston deal. And this is, the 3rd Boston deal. We use a Learjet. And DEA is working with Customs in Boston. Really good bunch of people. Fly to Gitmo in this Learjet, me and another Customs agent by the name of Kip. And everything is fine. We got country clearance. Now they're going to fly into Cali International Airport. So now we're going inland, like an international airport. They fly in and pick up the load. The bad guys package it, though, in squares instead of round duffel bags. So they're trying to stuff 2,000 keys of coke in a Learjet that's round with square. And thank God the contract pilot was a little nervous. He was looking at some jail time. He needed to cooperate really bad to help his case. But the colonel was with him, who had a great sense of humor. And he's trying to tell the Colombians, you're going to kill us. We can't take off with this. You got to stop. So at 1,640 kilos, they stop loading the plane. They take off. They come back to Gitmo. We transfer the load into a U.S. Coast Guard C-130. They crank up the AC so cold. I got a coat on. We fly to Weymouth, I guess, Naval Air Station up in Massachusetts.
Roger.
The thing about the Boston office was it was the only office that the special agent in charge himself 3 times came out. When we landed in Weymouth, there's the sack. That was unprecedented. And when I went on the cover on this deal to pick up the $500,000 that the bad guys owed us, the first guy to show up to back me up was the special agent in charge.
That's
gun drawn. I'm going like, wow, this guy's a leader. This is great. I love working with these Boston agents, And that deal went down fine, and we ended up having to go to a hotel. The investigation that they did was unbelievable to identify the main bad guy. And again, the DEA agents up there worked like this. It was phenomenal. Leads into the next Boston deal, 2,000 kilo deal. My partner and I fly out of state and pick up a Gulfstream G2. We give a guy like 20, 25,000 in cash. We identify ourselves, and he gives us the keys to his plane. And we said, we'll be back. And we had two pilots. The gambler who flew this, the guy who was supporting basically our operations from the beginning.
Roger.
That was the pilot in command. I call him Top Gun, a lot more than the gambler did. So this operation was going to be a little tense because we knew who we were dealing with in Colombia, like we did the other cases, but this case was identified a little bit more to the nth degree. And I'm glad we worked out the operational plan the way we did. But because of certain safety issues, we wanted to make this a little bit more covered. So I figured, what the heck? We got the Navy's always helped us out. They give us a Navy surface warfare vessel, and they position it off the coast of Colombia as a picket ship. We get an E-2C Hawkeye with the round dome on top, a U.S. Air Force AWAC, and Customs Air assets. I mean, we're loaded for bear. Because these guys have to fly with a bad guy passenger. Now, they can't search this guy when he gets on the plane. So if he pulls a gun out and he says, you're going to land in Virginia, or you're going to land in North Carolina or someplace else, our crew would have had to comply. And they would have got their 2,000 keys of coke, and they could have even said, we're going to pay you anyway, but you're going to go where we want you to go.
Roger.
That's why we needed to cover these guys like glue. So go to Gitmo, and there they are. They're flying into Cali International Airport again. It's just about sunset. And this time when they land, they get directed by the tower where to go behind the weeds. And there's a fuel truck there. And there's a stake bed truck with the load in it. But this time, one of the Colombian honchos comes on board the aircraft and starts talking to our crew. And the guys were well briefed, and it got him through it. And he blessed them. And Captain Cocaine, who we had this Colombian bad guy come on board the plane, he sat in the back. And our guys are, as they took off, we're getting notified by the Navy, their surface warfare vessel, the E-2C, the AWAC, Air Force AWAC is up in the Windward Passage area. We've got the customs aircraft going to go along the coast, citation jets, and they cover these guys all the way to Norwood, Massachusetts. There's a little airport in there. And
Nick, you're not going to believe this. Just a quick aside. I grew up across the street from that airport in Norwood, Massachusetts.
Are you
exactly
serious?
What you're talking about.
Well, we woke that town up at like 0200. It was like dark 30 in the morning. Are you serious?
Yeah,
wow,
there was a little access road, and it backed up to some woods, and my house was just on the other side of that woods.
You didn't happen to hear us that night, did you?
I was probably away at college at that point.
Okay. Well, you would have heard us if you were home sleeping. What the heck was that? UFO? And there's a little state police substation there. So we met there, and we had U.S. attorney actually brought us, assistant U.S. attorney brought us coffee and donuts and stuff. And then he left because they weren't allowed to be around when the action took place. They had to be out. So he left way before the plane got in. And they landed, which was, it's a tight field for a Gulfstream G2. And this delivery was tense. They sent a Colombian kid, a young man, when things weren't working out well. And we just kept refusing to deliver the load.
Roger.
And this guy was a pain in the neck. But after negotiations, and they would say things like, well, this is like the way the American police do it when you hang up the phone. Police, what are you talking about? And then they would always call back because we had their 2,000 keys of coke.
Check.
And they finally came up with the money one night. It was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. The surveillance teams that backed us up, there are no words to describe what they went through. I mean, I thought our job was like the fun part, playing, charades with bad guys. I mean, physically tiring because now it's like 2 in the morning. We're not really getting much sleep at night. But the surveillance teams, they're in position. They're in a Hilton hotel in Massachusetts. And they're out there like eons.
Right.
This is the summertime. This isn't fun. And there's teams inside. And the bad guys got a hotel room, and the hotel's cooperating with us. They're security people, so we know where the bad guys are staying. And our guys are across the hallway. So when it comes time to get the cash, Codfish was the source who was putting this together. I call him Codfish. Obviously, it's a New England thing.
Right.
And we have to go into their room. They say they have $500,000 for us in the room. They're going to give us the keys to vehicles with false compartments. We have to load each vehicle with so much cocaine. And they're going to drive the load down to New York in different vehicles, a Volkswagen Jetta, a van. And they had tools. They're very sophisticated. They had tools that you could use to take the inside paneling off the inside of the door without damaging it. So we could slip the kilos inside the door, in between the outside of the door and the inside of the door, and then put everything back and not make it look like anything was awry unless a canine unit hit on it. So pretty sophisticated. So once again, we get them. We're going to walk in the room. Now, the DEA group supervisor up there was really concerned. He goes, Nick, I don't know how we're going to get you out. If you walk in that room and they bolt the door on you and they pull a gun and they say, we're going to pay you. Here's your money. It's on the bed. But we're not going to, you can't leave this room until these vehicles make it to New York. They could have done that.
Sure.
I'm carrying a 5-shot Smith & Wesson, so I got 5 bullets. There's 5 Colombians in the room, and I'm in a hotel room. So how big is this? I walk in the room. Sure enough, they bolt the door behind me. So now I'm sitting there and I'm going, what am I going to do if they pull a gun on me? We can't let this load go. There's no way. I can't call my guys. I'm stuck. They'd have to blow the door to get into me. So I devised a plan that I was going to just shoot my way into the bathroom and just close the door. I mean, in my mind, I'm just trying to make plans like, how ugly can this get?
Sure.
And they keep counting the money over again, and they keep screwing up the count. It was kind of comical, but they got a guy standing by the door. So finally, they get the money, everything's fine, and they pay us. And I had a sense of relief. We leave, they give us they send somebody with us, they show us all their vehicles in the parking lot. Myself, an undercover, another customs agent, and a state trooper, we get into the vehicles and we take off. It's late at night, must be like 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And we're driving, in Massachusetts. Who's there? The special agent in charge. He shows up again. This guy's great. So we managed to get through unscathed. We got our money for the partial payment for our services rendered. And we have their load vehicles. We have enough. The bosses decide, let's just knock this off. And at breakfast time, they walk into the hotel, to the Hilton, and all the bad guys were having breakfast, and they basically lock them up. So I didn't have to do anything else.
Roger.
Fast forward ahead, we did a container case involving Korean smugglers, and I went undercover in Florida and in New York, and they were bringing in counterfeit Chanel products. And that was kind of a cool diversion to go from these major coke deals and do another kind of controlled delivery.
Roger.
That was still a smuggling case, and it's something that we did, and then we turned the case over to the agents up in New York. And on May 12th, 1993, I get called in, and I had to go back a bit. I was really hurting by now. When Hurricane Andrew hit, I told you I had problems. My undercover car was totaled, but before it got totaled, I had a hard time getting in and out of it. So by this time, I walked in the SAC office in Miami once with the cane because I just had a hard time walking. I didn't care at that point. I can't hide this. And I had internal affairs agents once ask me, you take a medication? And I said, yeah. And I took it out of my pocket and showed it to them. Pain meds, here we go. I was like, okay, no problem. Kept working. And I didn't drink, so I could take meds. So I walk into the SAC office, and the deputy SAC comes over, and he goes, what the heck happened to you? And the ASAC said, Oh, Nick crashed the plane with his drunken contract pilots. He can retire anytime he wants. I'm going, all right.
That's a hell of a way to
So
put it.
I swore I transferred to another duty station. I got a shot to go work for a buddy of mine who was my first group supervisor in the air smuggling unit near the Mexican border. Totally different environment. Never wanted to meet a Colombian again. Never wanted to work on the cover again. I'm done. I'm doing something else. I'm going to hide out and find something else fun to do. And I get out to where I am. I literally get there and get told the office is going to close. I'm going to have to transfer again. But I end up working a case up there. And who do I meet? A Colombian informant. I go, you guys are killing me. I don't want nothing to do with this. We start buying guns and working in a task force with state troopers and sheriff's deputies and city cops. So we're going with them. They go on a raid, we go with them. When it's a customs thing, they come with us. So it's a task force. So you do what they do, they do what you do.
Roger.
We had a contact who was in with this particular bad guy. And when this bad guy left, we had no way to continue this case. My partner, who was really the resident agent in charge, was a former Miami agent like me. So we knew Miami, we worked the same way. So I said, hey, Ron, pull over. Back then we had payphones. So we pull over to a payphone. I said, look, I'm just going to call the bad guy up on the phone cold. What do we have to lose? We still had the authority from the U.S. attorney to record conversations. So I get on the phone, call the bad guy up, and he goes, oh, you still want those AK-47s? Not a problem. So I go down to the border, and I needed a girlfriend. So Customs Air Operations had a very attractive woman, air officer, female air officer. Never met her before in my life in Tucson. But again, like people, you meet somebody, you click, and it works. I met her, I don't know where, in a gas station or something with a bunch of other agents. And she gets in my car, my undercover car, and she goes, you're claustrophobic, aren't you? That's how sharp she was, because I always hold my seatbelt away from my chest.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, I was in this little plane crash landing thing, and it just bothers me. I don't like to feel, seatbelt against me. That's how smart she was. We go down to this little border town, and we have to go into a closed Mexican restaurant. We have no idea how this is going to work out. She was phenomenal. You wouldn't think that we just met. Like we were boyfriend and girlfriend for some time. And the bad guys picked up on it, I guess. Everything worked out fine. We got the AK-47s, got 4,000 rounds of Chinese AK ammo, and we left. After I drop her off, I have to bring my undercover, my undercover car gets totaled.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so bad that I had the evidence on the passenger seat in a plastic bag, and it was shredded. When the impact took place, it got T-boned. The first thing that happened was the airbag exploded, and then my left side of my head hit the driver's side window, and I had a broad daylight flashback of the plane crash. Broad daylight. I was sitting in the co-pilot seat, blue sky, in the seaplane, and it's going down. And it lasted a split second. And when I came to, there's firefighters. And my head is against the window, and I guess I got knocked out. And should have went to the emergency room, and I didn't. My wife was not happy. And I had to work on something else. And I kind of paid for it. And then the day came when I got sent for medical fitness for duty. And I said, well, wait a minute. In Miami, I'm walking around with a cane, taking pain meds, working undercover, and no one has a problem with this. All of a sudden, and I knew I was getting worse, but really? So they sent me, and I had no choice. And they said, well, I was then, this is now.
Right.
What have you done for me lately? Uncle Sam. You could be a real SOB at times,
Yeah, you can.
COB, close the business today. Thank you. You didn't do it? Oh, sorry. So I go see their doctor, government contract doctor, and the guy says to me flat out, Nick, you don't even have to take your clothes off. He's got my medical file. It's like this thick. He said, there's no way. There's not a doctor who could keep his license, who's going to allow you to stay on this job. You're going to be medically retired. So I got my cred stamp retired, and adios amigo. And it's just, I was lucky that I had put in for permission to be a writer early on when I started writing Controlled Delivery. And late 1989, before I was ever in a plane crash. So I had written permission to be a writer. So when I medically retired, because our 3/4, our 75%, is like the military's used to be, where they could restrict your income. Can't restrict your income if you have previous authority to pursue a certain type of career. So I was allowed to write and keep the money, and I just cranked out, like 230 something magazine articles, and I'm working on my 14th book, and
the rest is
I'm
history.
happy, and I'm paying for the sins of my youth, but I go back and do it all over again. And like we talked, it's very similar to what you and your colleagues went through in the military. You have multiple deployments, you're away from home, your family, your wife is ticked off, your kids don't know who you are, or they don't remember you. You come home, you're brokenhearted. But on the personal side, the professional side of you is mission oriented.
Yes, sir.
And anytime you fight bad guys, it's a good fight. Whether the politicians win or lose this battle, it doesn't matter. We're winning against the bad guys. When you send us out, we're going to win. You want to screw up the drug war, that's your business. You're paying for this down the road. You want to screw up Afghanistan, you want to mess up the Gulf, you want to take Iraq and turn it, that's on you guys. But when we go operational, we're going to do our job and we're going to win every freaking time.
I understand that ethos, man. It sounds like you sure did, but it also sounds like that doc saved your life, man. Because I don't think you had one more chance in you.
No, I was done. I was so happy when the ASAC called me in and said, Nick, we're shutting it down. I thanked him. And he looked at me like he was shocked. I think he expected me to argue with him. I said, thank you. And he was like, really? And the group soup that I worked for, she was a really wonderful person. She said to me, Nick, I know you're hurt. She goes, if you're really hurting, just go in the back of our squad room there and just lay on the floor. I said, thank you. When I did the undercover deal, I was hurting so bad, I couldn't get my gun out of my ankle holster with help. And it actually worked in my favor, because when the backup team dropped me off, it was down by, in Manhattan, down by Madison Square Garden. And it was kind of a crummy neighborhood back then, and probably still is now, probably worse. And they dropped me off like 2 blocks away. So I'm walking with my cane and I'm hurting really bad. And there's counter surveillance people all over the place.
Sure.
So as I walk up to this little crappy hotel, the bad guys are holding the door for me. They see me coming. Thank you. And I used what was normally an infirmity that would have gotten anybody else medically retired early on. I used it as an asset. And I was in such pain that day in particular. You could see it on me. You
didn't have to act. You didn't have to sell.
I didn't have to act. There was no acting involved. And I went in a room, met the guy, everything was consummated, and I left, got in the elevator, left, told him the door for me. And I'm going, well, I just turned it around and used it as an asset.
Absolutely amazing. And Nick, this whole story has been amazing from start to finish. I've enjoyed the heck out of the books. I've enjoyed talking to you, developing our friendship. I've been so happy to have you on the show, man. And I just appreciate your service to the country. I appreciate your relationship with the 82nd Airborne Association, man. I
can't thank you enough for having me on, and the military guys that always came to back us up and help. We couldn't have done it without them.
No, that's amazing. And the lessons learned from it, just like I said in the first episode I did with you, the interagency coordination is just absolutely amazing. So it's very interesting to see things you pioneered in operations that I was involved with on the military side down the road. So it's just fascinating. So everybody, again, it's been Ben Powers coming at you from the Commander's Voice. Friend of the show, Nick Jacobellis, telling us all about controlled delivery. Very thankful you made it through such an eventful career. Guys, the books are his memoir, Controlled Delivery, volumes 1 and 2. I highly urge you to seek them out because they're a hell of a read. Nick, thank you so much for being here with me today, man.
Thank you, Ben. I'll see you again, buddy. Take care.
All right. Good night.
Bye-bye now.